Chris Marhefka, welcome to the Not So Stupid podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on, Juma. I'm
Yeah,
excited.
and yeah, I'm excited too, man. I'm glad to have you be here. So, for the people that don't know who you are, what you do, why don't you share a little bit about your story and how you got to what you're doing right now?
Awesome, man. Thank you. So where I am today, I call myself a coach and a facilitator, and I run three different programs in getting people from where they are to the life of their dreams. And this is either in with themselves, like their own self confidence, their own inner work, or it could be as it relates to being a more embodied man. I run a men's program specifically designed for leaders who want to show up better with their families, their businesses, their communities. And then I also have a relationship based program that's designed for conscious couples who are coming together and creating the relationship of their dreams. So, all of this for me is just honestly accumulation of well over it's now about 13 years of coaching, over 2,000 clients I've coached, and well over the 10,000 hours of mastery. And so I just sat with a lot of people one on one, listened to them, heard them out, and just am really, really good at identifying patterns for people to help them break through what's keeping them stuck in their life. And how I got there is honestly just by doing my own work first. I've always had a really strong growth mindset to where everything that I did, I always wanted to be improving and growing. And I spent well over a decade of personal development work, doing courses and hiring coaches and reading hundreds of books. There was one year where I read 100 personal development books in one year.
Man.
And I wouldn't actually recommend that. And I can talk about that if we want, but I wouldn't recommend that because what was missing was the integrating it into my life. And so I spent probably a decade accumulating a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience. And then specifically in the last 2 years, I've learned not really secrets, but I've learned how to actually implement it in people's lives to get real change and transformation. And for me, it happened by taking all of that knowledge of the first 10 years and learning and shifting what was actually in the way of like having this whole mass of knowledge, this whole mass of awareness of myself, and then learning new different tools to actually implement it and actually change my life. And once I had like both of those things like together, and then understood more about what was happening in the unconscious rather than just the conscious mind. Once I had all those things together, things really started to click with my coaching, and it allowed me to support a lot deeper work than I was before. So, honestly, the short answer is just trial and error. I tried it for myself, then I tried it with a lot of other people, and made all the mistakes myself. And now I'm at this point to where I get to help a lot of people in creating their life.
Yeah, man, that's powerful. I actually really love that story. I always love the stories of I went through this and now I want to stop other people from going through this or steer them down that path.
Yeah. It started with, and I'll explain the brief iteration of my own journey. It started with my physical body first.
Mm.
I got really into like the science of nutrition and performance and the science of like training. I was a personal trainer for a long time before I got into this deeper work. And I just started to understand how the process of putting in one rep every day would lead to an outcome in the future. And I started to really trust that process. And then I got into more of like mindset coaching, where I was coaching more of like leadership and communication and how to be more efficient in your life and how to structure your day and your life to hit goals. And so I was more into that realm, which is what I call more the mental. And then I got into the emotional, which was, okay, now that the physical and the mental are there, what are the things that are below the surface that are affecting my physical and mental. And then even now recently, I'm getting more into like now the spiritual side. And so more of the conversation of like, what am I here on this earth to do? Like, what is my connection to the rest of the world and the rest of everyone else? And so I can bring like all four of those different bodies or way of thinking into where someone's at. So yeah.
I like the phrasing of that, because I think when most people, you mentioned that they're kind of integrated, right? They work alongside each other and with each other. But I think when people want to focus on one thing, like they want to improve their body, they ignore the other three and they focus on just their body, right? Why is that so wrong in your opinion? If you want to phrase that.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I was just having this conversation a couple nights ago with someone, and it's that all of those things are related and they're all intertwined in some way. I like to think of it as like a braided rope. You can't just separate one of those threads out, and because they're all connected, they're all a part of the whole. And the whole wouldn't be as strong without addressing each one of those things. And when it comes to physical, when people are focusing on their physical body, there's definitely physical habits that are so supportive. Like we know a lot about eating clean and nutrition that will help people with their physical body. We know a lot about movement and exercise and how that will help the body. The part that a lot of people are missing when they compartmentalize is that the things that are keeping them from the habits, like eating healthy, are oftentimes emotional. So they're eating or they're going into self-sabotaging habits because of something that they are like not confident about themselves, or they're not worthy of it, or they just have some stress eating patterns, or they get into overwhelm and they just turn to food or any other drinking, smoking, sex, whatever other distraction, or phones. And so a lot of times those are just emotional responses that play out in physical actions. And so it's helpful to change the actions themselves. But once you get to the point to where you have a lot of awareness, you're like, yeah, I know what to do. These are the things that I know are good for me, but there's still something that's holding them back. That's when you need to go a little bit deeper into like, okay, what's the root of this? Like, where did this really come from? And that's the part that I think gets missed a lot. And it's the reason why people go through work with me in my programs, and they will have massive health changes without actually changing anything, because they've released a lot of the energy and a lot of like the burden that they're holding in their body that were causing them to either like keep weight on, or they were manifesting a disease in their body because there was some emotion that they weren't ready to look at, or some story. And the most lasting way is to look at them all at the same time, and to see like, okay, how is this playing out in my physical body? But like, where is it coming from emotionally? How am I thinking about this in my mind? And the way in which we tie it together is just having awareness to where it's showing up for you. So if we were to look at like, for using the health conversation, people would say, "Oh, I'm 10 pounds overweight, and it's affecting my health, and I have these conditions." And then we would go one layer deeper, and we would say, "Okay, what are the things that you already have awareness around that you could change? And then like, why are you not yet doing it? So like, why are you not doing it? Like, what's in the way?" And then we start to use our language to get into emotions. So it's like, oh, it's because of this and that. And they start talking about their family life or their work life. And then we go one layer deeper of like why those things are the way that they are. So it's like peeling back the onion of different layers.
And kind of breaking down what the purpose is behind each individual thing.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I feel like for me personally, working with people as well, it's, I feel like the purpose is kind of lost for a lot of people. They kind of do things because they feel like they should be doing things, or they saw someone else do it, or they think it's the, quote unquote right thing to do. But like when you ask them, why are they doing that? They don't really have a good answer. What do you think how do you think, you kind of briefly touched it already, but
Mhm.
how can we guide people more down that path of more intentional action, I guess?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good question. The first thing is to have an awareness that we were all taught that like our conscious mind, our thinking adult mind is in control. Right? Would that be a fair statement? I think most of us, at least in the Western world, are like, oh, it's a mind thing. I have more discipline or more willpower or whatever it is.
Right.
Um, and I think that perspective is holding a lot of people back because brain studies show that somewhere between, depending on which ones you look at, somewhere between 2% and 20% is really directed by the conscious mind.
Mm.
Meaning that somewhere between 80 and 98% is just our unconscious behaviors that are playing out.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that like a lot of times we're not even aware that they're happening. Like the way that you speak, the way that I speak, the way that you think, the way that I think, the way that you feel and I feel is different. But both of us have some awareness to like, oh, this is just the way that I am. The reason why we like to get really granular on that point is that if you are different than I am, then it's very possible for you to think the way that I think. They're just different scripts.
Mm-hmm.
And so we first make people aware to like what are the unconscious parts of your script that are running the show and you're not aware of. So it's almost like we bring them to the surface first so that people can realize that, oh, I'm not actually a procrastinator. Like people are just like, oh, I'm a procrastinator, or I'm this, or I'm that, or I'm an anxious person.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like, oh, okay, well, you are right now in this moment. You have behaviors that are procrastinating, or you have behaviors that aren't anxious, using those two examples. But like if we were to cut you open, like we would find heart, we'd find lungs, we'd find like muscles. We wouldn't find a procrastinator, right? That's just something that you learn to be. And so when you start to have that perspective of, oh, it's not who I am, it's who I learn to be, you can then realize, okay, if I learned it, I can unlearn it and relearn something new. And it's that part that I'm really interested in, is like all those things that people aren't aware of yet, bringing them to the surface, shifting them so that they don't have to be working against themselves all the time, like fighting against their own behaviors, fighting against their own mind, which is the position I hear a lot of people in when they get into personal development. They're always like fighting their mind or trying to reason or talk themselves in or out of certain things. It's like they're talking themselves into working out or eating healthy just because they think that they should. And a lot of times that comparison story was taught to most people too. And so once that's gone, it gives people access to more of their why, like you said. And it's not about telling them what's right for them. It's just about getting the things out of the way that they've heard from other people, they saw in the magazines or on Instagram, getting
Mm-hmm.
those things out of the way so that they can have more access to their own self. Um,
Okay. So I wanted to, you mentioned the comparison story and how that creates resistance, but, going through, I guess, general personal development, they're always going to tell you there's going to be resistance to the new behavior you're trying to accomplish. You're always going to have to, because again, these are, like you mentioned, a lot of unconscious things that you're doing. You've been doing them for years in most instances. It's going to be hard to undo and unwind. There's going to be some resistance there.
yeah.
But what is this comparison story that you think adds more resistance to it, and how can you push through that to get to the other side?
Yeah, I think it's first an acceptance that I'll use myself as an example. There's many times where I catch myself wishing that I was further along in
Mm-hmm.
development. And certain there's times where I wish I knew more or I embodied more of this thing. And the first step is just accepting, like, oh, this is where I'm at today. Great. There is no timeline to our lives other than the one that we artificially put on it. There's no timeline to like how you get these things done and how you live your life. And so first accepting that it doesn't exist, and B, accepting where you're at today is a good place to start, because then you can just say, okay, great, this is where I am, and now I can take a step forward in that. But if we're always stuck in it's almost like the past of who we were, or like what we have today, what baggage we're carrying forward. If we're always stuck in that, we're not actually looking at what we can do moving forward. So it's like the resistance itself is distracting us from looking at the thing and working on the thing. And so it's not so much about like eliminating the resistance, because like you said, it's natural. What we're doing is we're taking a bunch of patterns that have been very well ingrained, and we're now saying that we want to do something different. And it's like when you work out in the gym, if you take someone who has been training their squat improperly, and they just have this squat that's all jacked up, and you're trying to teach them proper mechanics of body position, it's going to take a lot of reps to ingrain the new body pattern for them to do it unconsciously. And the same thing happens with our all of our thoughts, our words, and our actions. It takes time, and that time depends on how committed people are, and how much they're able to overcome the resistance of that. Which the opposite of resistance is just acceptance.
Right.
So the more you can be in acceptance, the less resistance you have.
Right. I mean, I feel like that analogy is really cool in the sense of, in my mind, I'm imagining, flowing with the river. If you are trying to go against the river, you're going to always face resistance. But you're choosing to go against the river, and facing that resistance, you could easily just ride the wave and let it take you wherever it's going.
Absolutely, man.
I was laughing a little bit earlier because you said, you mentioned a couple times that like these stories you tell yourself, these experiences that you're going through, these timelines you give yourself aren't real. And I feel like I'm imagining at least a couple people having an existential crisis right now when you tell them that, like, man, nothing is real, what am I doing? Like, how do you that's overwhelming in a lot of instances to hear that for the first time and come to that realization. And that also can create a lot of resistance in itself if you're not prepared for it. Sure. How do you kind of calm people down a little bit to ease into that and accept it more?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think everyone that starts out on this path of like growing and changing themselves and getting into this deep work, they have a moment where they realize some version of, wow, this life that I've been living isn't exactly what I want, and it may not be actually what it seems. And so it can feel like a big shock to the system. But it doesn't need to be like a shattering shock if you can get to the point of realizing like, oh, that's just what it means when I start to wake up to the reality that like I have control over what my life looks like. And that shift from like life controlling you to you having control over life is like that schism is where that shock happens, when it really starts to sink in. And I think it's almost required because it's a very different way of looking at life and self. So when it's like, oh, this is just life happening to me, and like all these events are happening, and this is just the way that it is, and I'm just a product of external environment, versus shifting to, oh, I'm generating my reality. I'm generating the way I'm experiencing life. It takes a pretty big shift. And so for some people, it can happen like in a moment where it's like they just have a really big experience, or someone says something that like blows their mind wide open, or they do some plant medicine or something. And it's a big shock. It's a big shock, and it's fragmenting. It also happens with people over time when they notice it happen in a small area of their life, and they're like, wow, this really works. Like, wow, I actually feel different about this. And that's how it more than likely happens. But the calming down part is, again, it's taking a breath, it's slowing down, and it's saying, oh, this is just where I'm at. this is just part of the human journey. There actually isn't a right or a wrong way to do the human journey. That brings me peace every single time I personally run into something that I wish was different. Is like, oh, there's not actually a right way to do this life. It's just like, what do I personally want in this moment? And it takes so much of the pressure off. Unfortunately, like a lot of what people believe is the right way and the wrong way is unconscious for a lot of people. It's been taught to them by parents and by our culture of wherever you were raised in your community and your religion, if you were raised in one or not raised in one, and then just your schooling and just whatever systems you grew up in, you get really well conditioned. And most people just forget that fact that like, oh, I just learned all these things, and it's just one option. It would be like if we went down to South America and people were speaking Spanish. Is it right that they're speaking Spanish, and is it wrong that I'm speaking English? No, it's just what I like. I learned to speak English as my primary. They learn to speak Spanish, and so it's the same exact idea. Is it wrong that your favorite color is green and my favorite color is blue? No, of course not. That's just like what we learned.
Right.
And so it's the way that people are living their life is really similar. And what I try to bring awareness to in whatever way that I can is that we all get to choose our path. We don't have to follow the script we were given. Now, if you like everything about the script you were given, if you truly like it, then yeah, keep doing that thing. But if there's pieces of it that you don't like, it's very possible to take those pieces out and replace them with new pieces that you do like. And that sometimes can be shocking. Yeah. Yeah.
It's shocking at first, but it's empowering, right?
It is. In my way, in my eyes, it's like, man, now that I'm in it, it's like, it's the only way that like you're literally taking your power back of like, you're choosing to have responsibility for your life. But it can that can be really scary. And so I have enormous compassion for people that are going through that transitional shifting from to them to for them and created by them. I have so much compassion because it's scary. It's literally taking on ownership of your life, like fully owning your life.
It's kind of like the difference between like the entrepreneurial journey where you take control of everything versus having a regular job or with an employer. You create so many things for yourself, but it's a lot on your shoulders. There's a lot more responsibility. It's scarier. But ultimately, if you control things the right way, you're better off for it later on, in theory, right?
And it's not better off by anyone's measures but yours. It's like it's usually the more decisions you're making for yourself, the more your life is going to be aligned with you. And so that's the point, that it's not about how much using the business example of entrepreneur versus working in a company. It's not about how much money you make or your benefits or your schedule or whatever. It's like, do those things align with what you actually want? And if so, then you choose the path that's most aligned for you. And also, a lot of people are finding that while they did buy into like the safe career or the safe relationship or the safe schooling or the safe whatever, it's not as safe as they thought it was. Like, people are starting to realize that now, is that, oh, I can't actually outsource my life to other people because they'll take it in whatever direction they want to go with it. Like if I give my money away for someone to manage, if I give my health away for someone to manage, if I give my emotions away for someone to manage, so a lot of people do in relationships, they give their emotions away. And so you're literally just giving your own power, and someone is going to hold it and they're going to do something with it, but you're probably not going to like all of it because they're doing it the way they want to do it and not. And so when you take that power back and you learn how to using these examples, manage your own money. You learn how to manage your health, manage your fitness. You learn how to manage your emotions. You learn how to manage your schedule, and you learn how to manage communication. It's so much more of an empowering place to stand, because that's where creation comes from. Is like you make those decisions that you want rather than just the decisions that are made for you.
Mm-hmm. I like that, because I'm glad you made that point of it's only better off in comparison to you, because that's like by your standards. Because again, like going back to comparing things as right or wrong, it's all been just subconscious comparison for everything you've learned. And I always think back to this quote I heard of Alan Watts, where he looks up at the sky and he asks you, have you ever seen a cloud that wasn't perfect? Have you ever seen a cloud that was wrong? It wasn't designed properly, right? And that's just a silly thing to say, but it's the same thing with people. It's the same thing with you and I. It's the same thing with everyone that's listening to this podcast. They're all, great as they are. It's just choosing to recognize it that way, as opposed to comparing it to another thing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's like a very peaceful place to stand in your life. It's a very peaceful to realize, like, oh, I'm perfect as I am. And I can look at it's like the paradox of growth. It's like I can accept myself fully from where I'm at, and also choose to continue wanting to grow or expand or to be better in whatever way that is. And so that's really, really empowering.
And on that last point, I think I work with a lot of people that are trying to lose weight, look better, and they always feel like they can't truly be happy with their body, with themselves. They can't truly feel confident until they reach that end point. But you just made that distinction that I thought was very relevant, of you can be confident now, you can be happy now, and still want to change yourself. It's not, they're not mutually exclusive. They can work together at the same time.
And I'm starting to really feel this out, but I really almost believe that acceptance is a requirement first. Like full acceptance. So full acceptance of like, yeah, I'm 100 pounds overweight. I am fully accepting that I made decisions that got me here, and that I have this current situation. And if they can fully accept that, the capacity to change is much greater. But if there's parts of it that they aren't accepting, again, we said the opposite of acceptance is resistance. Anytime you're resisting something, it's going to move slower. The amount of resistance that you push against it is going to be the same that pushes back. And so your progress is slower. You get more frustrated with it. You get less results. And so the full acceptance is where you can just make massive changes, because you're just completely cutting yourself out of the equation. We're all in our own way. It's just how much are we in our way? And the more we accept ourselves and where we're at, the less the more we're getting out of our own way, the less we're in our own way. So yeah.
So you have a lot of great things to say about personal development, and becoming a better you, growing, and all that stuff. But at the beginning, you mentioned you have a little, I don't know, like a little beef, I guess, with how personal development generally is. You want to talk about that a little more?
Yeah. It's not necessarily the industry of the personal development. It's the way people think about what it means to grow. And most of the time, at least what I was taught and what I witnessed for people, is that more consumption of information equals growth. Is like what I believe a lot of people are thinking.
Right.
And that is, it doesn't mean anything unless the information that you're consuming is contributing to a better life for you in whatever way that you define better life. So it's, are you growing as a result of consuming that information? And I think that the personal development industry is really good at information. It's really good at teaching you, like, hey, these are the 5 steps to do this thing. Like, this is how you grow your coaching business to 6 figures or whatever it may be. They're really good at that and giving information. And that's not wrong, but it's only one step in the process. And I think that there's a lot more room for people individually and as the industry as a whole to teach people how to actually make the changes, like get the things that unstuck that are holding them back, and not just layer on more data. Like, here's more things for you to do in your life. It gets to the point to where, I mean, if I did all of the morning routines that like people said was good for me, it would take me 24 hours. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, there's like so many habits and so
They're
many
intense.
strategies. Yeah.
And I think like that's true. Like branching off what you're saying, everyone's always looking for the one book that's going to solve their problem, that's going to change their life, and the one routine that's going to do that as well. But it's never, you can read that book 30 times, but it doesn't mean it's going to change your life until you decide to do it for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that there's even a case for, so some people do a good job of bringing awareness, and then a lot of people do a good job, which is stage 1. And then stage 5 is the integration of it. Some people actually do a really good job of doing that. They become aware of a problem, and then they find a solution, and they start doing that solution. That's like better than just consuming information, because they are taking action. The next step that I think people eventually get to is that they get to the point to where they've just added so much that it feels like a full-time job to be growing and developing. And again, the way I describe that is that they're working against themselves. Like their mind is now trying to overcome some unconscious behavior. And so when people get to that point, that's usually when they find work like what I do, where we address the unconscious. So it's like, okay, I've been doing these things, they've been working, but now I'm at this point to where I keep doing the things and it's not quite growing anymore. Like I've hit a ceiling, or I'm coming back to the same problems in different areas of my life. And so it's like, okay, I can't just keep doing more. I can't meditate for an hour a day and then do yoga for an hour, and I do this and like, you know what I mean? It's like, I just can't keep adding more tasks on my list.
Right.
And so then we get to, okay, what's the energy? What's the root of this? Like, what's the reason why this keeps showing up? And then that's when I think people have like really, really massive breakthroughs, and not just incremental breakthroughs.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. You reminded me of this daily planner that I got recently from a friend. They highly recommended it. It's from Brendan Bouchard, I think his name is. Yeah. And it's like a morning outline for your day, and it has like these prompts. And I kid you not, like going through, he wants you to write essays for each day, and it's like it takes like, without exaggeration, I think if I actually did it with like all of my concentration, it would take me 2 hours to do every morning, which is just so unrealistic. And I had to put that aside.
Yeah. And that is, I think that's what a lot of people are experiencing right now in the personal development, is like, they're experiencing that. They're like, this isn't reasonable. And so like when I go through, like in our program, we say like, not what are the next 10 steps. It's what is the next one obvious step that's like, you already know is there. Like, you know, it's like right at the tip of your tongue. Like, what's that one? And then do that one consistently. Do that one thing consistently, and notice how that shifts for you. And so it makes integration a lot more manageable than just it's like the New Year's resolution thing, right? It's like, if we really just chose one habit for our New Year's resolution, and we committed to that for the year, of just like 1 minute a day of doing this one thing, you'd be a completely different person in a year. But what most people do is they take like, okay, I'm going to completely overhaul my career. I'm going to completely overhaul my relationship, completely overhaul my health. These are the 10 things in each category I'm going to do. And then and it's like, no, you're not. Like, you're not gonna do all of that today. And so what happens? It's not the intention that holds them back. It's the fact that it's an unreasonable jump for them to make, while still trying to live their life that they have been living. And so the thing that I always encourage people to do is, when they're going to make a change in their life, most people think that they have to have the next answer and be doing the next answer to make the change. I think that's actually backwards. You have to make the space first, so that you can have room to put the new thing in.
Mhm.
You have to clear things out of the way, and that means like mentally, in your time, in your energy, and I think that's a lot more lasting. But that forces people to really look at their life and prioritize like what things are actually important to me, versus admitting that like, oh, I've been filling my time with 3 hours of TV and 2 hours of Instagram and like whatever else it
Right.
is. Um, yeah.
I think rolling off of the point you're kind of making, what I've realized with a lot of people I work with that are, coming on and trying to make changes with their life, and just the people in general that I talk to, is there's this underlying mentality that doing more is going to be
Mhm.
better for you, or going to yield more results for you,
Yep.
because I don't know, it just seems like if it's not more, then it's not enough, but enough is only, uh, I say this to some of my clients that have overeating issues. Enough is as good, or enough is as good as a feast. Yeah, if
Yeah.
you're happy with what you have, and you're content with it, you don't need to do more. Doing more isn't going to make it better for you. But
Mhm.
what do you? I'm interested to hear your thoughts about this idea of more is better, and how you kind of combat it in the modern world, because I think that's a very common theme across the average person.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I think the solution for just about every single person that I've seen is less in their life, and less meaning less distractions, less avoiding, less things that they don't actually want to be doing. They
Mhm.
just have found themselves in the pattern of doing. And what that leaves room for is more intentionality, so
Mhm.
more intentional actions, more intentional relationships and conversations. And um, so I what I do is I help people make a connection to the root of it, where it came from. Usually for most people, they can immediately tie it back to either mom or dad or both. So it's
Mhm.
like this is just a learning that they got from when they developed. And again, as soon as you make a connection to like where it came from, there's now an opportunity that this is a real thing that I can change, and it's not just some nebulous idea that I've been playing out. Um, and and if you get to the point to where you're like, okay, this is where it came from, this is where I learned it, this is just something I learned, then you can start shifting the belief around that more is better mentality. Because I also I start to get really curious. I'm like, okay, if more is really better, like show me examples of like more being better. And most people that I know personally, and I know people that have had success in business and financially, and success with their families and all this, the people that are the most fulfilled with their lives aren't measuring by the same scoreboard that most of modern society is. They're not measuring by work at all costs. They're not measuring by money at all costs. They're not measuring by, most of them are measuring by fulfillment and impact. So like, how fulfilled, happy, and joyful, in love am I with my life, and what impact am I making on the collective community and the world. And that's a very different mindset than what we're taught in school, and get the good job and the high paying job, and
Mhm.
make six figures a year, and then buy more things, and more things mean more prestige or significance. Most people that I know that are fulfilled that's not what they're measuring by at all. And so I try to model my life after the things that I want. So like, if I want more fulfillment in my life, I'm going to find the person that's the most fulfilled. I'm not going to find the person that's miserable and they're making 10 times as much money. That doesn't mean anything to me.
Mhm.
So yeah, uh, it's a hard lesson to learn, that less is more, until you start doing it and you immediately start seeing the benefits. And I think once people start to fall into that groove of like faster, and it's just like this more and faster mentality. I think once people start to fall out of that, and they pay more attention to how they're feeling, they're like, oh, my body actually feels better when I slow down, when I take a rest day, when I
Right.
get more sleep, when I deal with my emotions. Like, my body feels better when I am working in something that I enjoy versus something that I hate. And I think once people start feeling the effects, that's when they really start to buy into like, oh, this can actually work for me. It doesn't have to look that way.
Right. They have to experience it first before they're
Yeah.
actually like going through it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I like that. Okay, so one thing I wanted to talk about, as we go through this, before we started the podcast, and you touched on it a couple of times, is embodying masculinity. That was something you mentioned you help people with. Can you go deeper about that, what that looks like and what that means? Like, what is masculinity to you? How would you define that? And what's the process of actually embodying that definition for you?
Yeah, love that. So the first, I always make a really clear distinction because I think it gets confused in the media a lot. Is there's a big difference between masculine energy and men, and we masculine energy is just one of the two naturally occurring energies in the world, masculine and feminine. It occurs everywhere in nature. It occurs in every one of us. And I think that there's some language that's confusing. And so I'm going to be talking about just the energy of masculine. And the energy of masculine is I call it the doing versus the being in the world. The masculine is the doing side. It's when we're actually like going forward and taking action. We're speaking what we want into the world. We're doing. We're moving forward. And then the feminine is the being. It's much more of like a surrendering. It's an observing. It's a letting things flow through us. The best analogies I can give are most people look at business as very masculine, and most people look at like art and music as more feminine. It's more creative. It's more interpretive. It's more free flowing. And business is more like structure, and it's more rules and like ABC to outcomes. It doesn't have to be, but I think that's the way that most people look at like the art and business analogy. Now, the masculine energy as it plays out in people is the same exact thing. It's like, how much of your life are you spending doing, like actively doing, versus how much of your life are you spending being? And we could use like a simple day as an example of that. How much are you just sitting still? How much are you just paying attention to your thoughts? Some people call that mindfulness. How much are you creating in the world versus like how much are you just moving from one task to the next? The reason I like to talk about masculinity in embodying it is because most of us in the US, at least, were raised in a highly masculine culture. Everything was about doing, and this goes back to what we were just talking about. Everything was about more, 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 and it's a masculine principle to just to do, and that's valuable. But what's also valuable is the other side. I think that the problem that we've run into in our society, which is the reason I like coaching on this, is that we're just way too far skewed in the masculine. And this goes for both men and women. Most women were raised in just as masculine of an environment as men, maybe slightly less. But still, if you want to be successful in sports or in business or in like even schooling, is just very a masculine approach, the way that we do it in this country. And again, just like if we traveled, that's not the case everywhere. Like I travel to South and Central America a lot, and the pace of life is much slower. There's much more of an attunement to nature and the cycles of life. There's much more slowing down and peacefulness in a lot of those. And so we in the US just have like taken on a very like masculine approach to life. And I believe personally that it's just way too far skewed. So the answer isn't necessarily eliminating it. It's just getting more in tune with our feminine as well. Unfortunately, as well, I think that a lot of the examples that most people have, some of the models of masculinity, aren't actually healthy expressions. I think they're very unhealthy, or what some people would call like toxic behaviors of like
Mm-hmm.
toxic masculinity. And the how that shows up is the forcing your way. That's like the most common like toxic example, is like forcing your way in
Mm-hmm.
whatever that means. That means you verbally, physically, like you're not forcing your ideas, you're forcing your decisions. And that's what a lot of people have experienced in growing up, is like,
Mm-hmm.
this is just the way that it is, and it's very forced. And I think we just learn that that's the way to do things, is like, to get what you want, you just force your way to it. It's like you force your
Right.
idea at work, you force your position in your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, like myself and most other men that I work with, for men especially, they don't have good models of what healthy masculinity actually is,
Mm-hmm.
which I think really comes down to safety and presence, is being able to be safe, create a safe container, to speak safely, to act safely,
Mm-hmm.
so that the expression and the creative of the feminine can actually come through. And I didn't have it personally. Most men I know didn't have it, and so I don't believe that it's. I don't try to place blame on anyone for how they show up, because they're just
Mm-hmm.
playing out a script of what they learned.
Right. No, I can definitely think to times where, well, not times, I should say. I can definitely think and realize that I've also never had this ideal embodiment of masculinity, or this
Mm-hmm.
balance, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
What really surprised me about what you said, though, is it sounds like when you talk about the embodiment of masculinity, it's not so much finding more masculinity, it's
No.
toning it down a little bit and balancing it out more so, right?
Yeah, I would say it's not necessarily toning it down, but it's finding the ways in which you're expressing in an unhealthy way and just shifting those to healthy,
Mm,
because the intensity of it may not change.
okay.
And actually, I think that that's something that I actually think we need to turn the volume up on. And
Okay.
I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. But all of us have like this power and this drive,
Hmm.
and if we were to just turn down the volume of it, we would be resisting what's happening inside of us. And that drive to that like drive forward in life is that masculine. And if it's directed towards stuff that hurts ourselves or others, then yeah, that's not a good thing.
Hmm.
But if we were to really embrace the fact that we all have this power and this drive, and we were to teach people how to balance themselves and then direct it towards something that's good for ourselves and good for the collective, then that's when we get to turn it up. Instead of suppressing all that masculine energy, we're just like, yeah, like, let's bring more of that, but let's bring it in a direction that's purposeful and intentional and helps the collective.
Right.
And so I think that's where a lot of people get into internal conflict, is that they're taught they can't express a lot in this way, and so there's a lot of suppression, like, don't feel that, don't do that, don't do this.
Hmm.
But then we're also asking people to be more passionate in their relationships, and we're asking them to have goals and be career oriented. And you can't suppress the energy on one side and just expect it to be there on the other side. So a lot of people go through this internal conflict of like how they show up or how they express, because they don't really know what's healthy. And to get the positive benefits, you also have to feel through. You have to feel through the frustration. You have to feel through the anger, and not express it onto someone, but you have to know how to like feel it in a healthy way. That's the
Hmm.
same. That's the same thing that is like our drive. Like, our drive in this world is the same thing that comes from our anger and our that power channel.
Hmm.
And I believe that feeling it all the way through is what gives us access to more and more of it. Um, Yeah.
Okay. So it's not holding back the
No,
intensity of the feeling. It's just
no.
directing it at in the
Yeah,
right
exactly.
direction, right?
Yep.
It's kind of like if I were to go on a road trip to Florida and I'm driving 80 miles an hour, but I'm driving north, it's well intentioned, but not going to be getting there anytime soon.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Nice. Okay. So now, um, obviously, you touched on kind of the dichotomy of toxic and
Hmm.
healthy masculinity. What do you think in the modern world we can do a better job of shifting that? How can I say this? So
Yeah,
in the
no, I got
modern
it.
world,
Yeah.
you got it. So how
Mhm.
can we kind of what definitions of masculinity do you think can be turned healthy that we aren't doing right now?
Mm. So I love this question. I think that the first thing that we can do is we can admit, like, honestly, that masculine energy is a very positive thing
Hmm.
and feminine energy is a very positive thing.
Mm.
I think what the mistake is that we're making one wrong or making the other wrong, or they're not wrong or right. They're both important and powerful. And so I think that's the first thing.
Hmm.
And the other thing is, if we can accept that they're both good, we also need to accept it in each one of us as well. And I think that's something we talked about before we started recording, was that if you're a person who is wanting to heal their own masculine energy, or you're with someone who is, and you're supporting them, maybe it's a partner or a friend,
Hmm.
the giving them permission is oftentimes what the masculine needs, is like giving them permission to be like, hey, it's okay if you share this, I'm not going to blame you. Or if you open up about something, I'm not going to belittle you or emasculate you. And the solution is allowing the people that are struggling internally, allowing them to express and to talk about these things and giving them permission to open up. Because the more that they suppress it, the bigger the problem gets with inside of them. It gets bigger and more pressure. And
Hmm.
so I call it holding space, just holding space for someone to shift it individually. Uh, Collectively, I think that we have misaligned values.
Hmm.
So I think if we were to shift it on the whole, it would require the values of the collective to change, because by design, most of our culture values um, growth at all costs. It values destroying things to get ahead in financial or some way
Hmm.
with power. And so it's like we're destroying people, we're destroying our natural resources, we're destroying cultures because we want to get ahead in some way. And so I think that value has to that value has to change for the collective to change. And how values change is just we change them as individuals. So our culture is just a collection of a bunch of individuals, and so as we do it individually, it changes the whole collective.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I like that because it is basically like, just like that saying, you're just a single drop in the ocean, but the ocean is just a collection of drops. You
Hmm.
gotta
Yeah.
get everyone on board to change everything
Hmm.
altogether. I like that a lot.
Absolutely.
And what do you think is some values that more people can start embodying that can help shape the collective in a more
Yeah.
um, positive direction?
Love it. Feeling. I think we've put way too much overemphasis on thinking
Mm.
and way underemphasized feeling. So I think teaching people how to feel their emotions, to feel what's happening inside of them, is much more valuable than teaching people how to think more about their problems.
Hmm.
So just feeling objectively. I think that's one. I think taking individual responsibility is two. I believe that that in itself, if we were to stop pointing the fingers outward at what everyone else could do better and really took 100% ownership of what we're doing, by design, if everyone did that, we would all be,
It's a utopia right there.
exactly. So, I think that's two. And then I think as that happens, collectively, more understanding, more compassion, more forgiveness, people as they're taking responsibility. Because if we're saying we want more people to take individual responsibility, then when someone does and they're like, hey, look, I don't like how I've been showing up, if we immediately attack them and say, yeah, you're the worst, and like, yeah, I can't believe you did it, like, what's that going to do? That's just going to shut them down, and they're
Right.
going to be like, okay, not taking any more responsibility. But instead, if we can say, like, it's safe to do that, and like, I get it, like, I appreciate you like taking ownership of this, and like that takes a lot of courage to do so. We're encouraging more of that behavior. And so if that's like in your family or your relationships or at work, is no matter which side you're on, if you're the one that's taking ownership or you're holding space for someone that is doing it, like there's something that you can do there. And so being understanding, forgiving, having compassion for people, because again, I truly believe that people are doing the best that they can with what they've been taught, with the knowledge that they have, with the experience that they have. And when I see people through that lens, like I can love them so much and have compassion and empathy for them, because like, fuck, they're doing their best.
Right.
They're literally doing their best. I genuinely think that most people want to do what's best for themselves and for others. And when we do those things, when we take responsibility, when we hold space and give compassion for others, then I think the world would be a much, much better place for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I align with those values heavily, so I'm like very happy that you said those on the show. But we're coming close to our time right now. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I would love for you to share where people can find you at, because this was an enlightening conversation, I'm sure, for a lot of people. And if they want to see more of your work, where can they go through the internet to find you?
Beautiful. Thank you. ChrisMarhefka.com is my site has everything that I have going on. And then Chris Marhefka on Instagram. And then lastly, my main program, the one that most people start with, is called trainingcampforthesoul.com. And that's where we do the emotional healing work that really transformed my life as I went through that program before I started working with them. So
yeah, I love that you live it. You're not just speaking it. We need more of that too.
Yeah.
So now one more question for you. This is the Not So Stupid podcast, and we focus on simplicity in improving our everyday lives. So what is one simple thing that someone can do as soon as they're done listening to the show that can help dramatically improve their lives?
Love that question. And I would actually say, let's do it right now as we're closing the show. And my answer is to slow down, take a deep breath, just really give yourself permission to just breathe in deeply, and then let your body relax as you exhale. And then do a couple more of those. Do one, do two, do three. And I truly believe that this process of slowing down and breathing is the first step, because we can start to notice what's actually happening and not get caught up in ourselves, not get caught up in our stories, not get caught up in our emotions or our triggers. It's where we can take a step back. And in martial arts, it's like what they call softening your gaze. You just become more aware of everything that's happening around you. And most people are living our lives in these laser focused tunnels of our own experience. And when we slow down and we breathe, our awareness opens up, and it gives us space to act differently, to think differently, to speak differently. And what I find is that when most people slow down, they get more access to their heart. And when people are speaking and acting from their heart, it's generally going to be a better world for themselves and for others. And so really slow down and just give yourself space. Yeah.
I love that. I hope everyone actually followed through with that and experienced that with us, because that was very calming and good transition into the rest of my day, personally, at least. Yeah, and hopefully for everyone else. But thank you, Chris, again, for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom with us. Very much appreciated. Again, if you want to see more of Chris's work, it will be linked in the show notes. And we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thanks for listening.